The guards told him 3 times to step back from Gate 7, but the old man just stood there, staring through the fence. Then the sirens screamed, and everything changed. The sun hangs low over Naval Air Station Oceana, casting long shadows across the security checkpoint. Heat rises in waves from the asphalt, making the air shimmer above the concrete barriers that protect the base entrance. Gate 7 sits at the eastern perimeter, away from the main visitor access point. It's a working gate, used primarily for cargo trucks, contractors, and personnel with specialized clearance. Chain-link fencing topped with coiled razor wire stretches in both directions, disappearing into the tree line. Beyond the fence, FA-18 Super Hornets sit in neat rows on the tarmac, their grey bodies gleaming in the afternoon light. The distant rumble of jet engines carries on the wind. This is a place of precision and protocol, where every person and vehicle is accounted for, where security isn't just a job, it's a sacred responsibility. Gate 7 wasn't the kind of place civilians usually wandered. It wasn't marked on any tourist map. There were no gift shops nearby, no plaques explaining its history. It was just a gate, steel and wire and purpose. But on this particular Tuesday in September, someone had come to stand before it, and he wouldn't leave. Staff Sergeant Marcus Chen leans against the security booth, one hand resting near his sidearm, the other holding a lukewarm bottle of water. He's been on duty since 0600, and the monotony of the shift has settled into his bones. Check IDs, verify clearances, wave through authorized vehicles, repeat. His partner, Corporal Jessica Reyes, sits inside the air-conditioned booth, her eyes moving between 3 monitors that show feeds from the cameras positioned along this section of perimeter. Chen notices him first. The man stands approximately 30 feet from the gate, just outside the clearly marked, restricted zone. He's older, maybe late 60s, early 70s, with close-cropped white hair and a weathered face that speaks of years spent outdoors. He wears faded jeans, work boots worn smooth at the toes, and a plain grey t-shirt. Nothing remarkable, nothing threatening. But he's staring at the gate with an intensity that makes Chen straighten up from his casual lean. The man's hands hang loose at his sides. He's not holding anything. Not a phone, not a camera, not a sign. He's just standing there, perfectly still, his gaze fixed on something beyond the fence. There's a difference between looking and seeing. Most people who pass by military installations look. They glance at the gates, maybe slow down to glimpse the aircraft, satisfy their curiosity, then move on. But this man was seeing. His eyes tracked movement on the flight line with a familiarity that couldn't be faked. He was seeing past the present into layers of time that only someone who'd lived here would recognize. Chen sets his water bottle down and steps out from the shade of the booth. The heat hits him immediately, pressing against his uniform like a physical weight. He approaches the man with practiced caution, not aggressive, but alert. His training runs on autopilot. Assess the threat level, establish communication, maintain situational awareness. He calls out to the man, asking him to step back from the restricted area. The man doesn't respond, doesn't even acknowledge that he's heard. His eyes remain locked on the gate, on the section of base visible through the chain-link diamonds. Chen moves closer, his boots crunching on the gravel shoulder of the access road. He can see the man's face more clearly now. There's something carved into those features, not anger, not confusion. It's something deeper. Recognition, maybe, or memory. Chen speaks louder this time, explaining that the man is standing in a restricted area and needs to move back behind the yellow line for his own safety and security. The yellow line is painted across the asphalt 20 feet behind where the man stands, marking the boundary between public access and controlled space. It's not subtle. It's not optional. The man blinks slowly, like someone surfacing from deep water. His gaze shifts from the gate to Chen, and for a moment, the staff sergeant feels something unexpected, not threat, but sadness. It's there in the man's eyes, ancient and heavy. The old man's voice comes out quiet, but firm. He can't move back. Chen insists that this isn't a request. The man needs to move back now, but the old man shakes his head slowly. Chen doesn't understand, he says. He needs to be here. Right here. The man's voice is rough, textured like sandpaper. There's a faint accent underneath, something southern that's been worn smooth by time. He turns back to the gate, dismissing Chen without rudeness, simply with the weight of his attention shifting elsewhere. Chen's hand moves instinctively to his radio. He reports to Reyes that he has a situation at the fence line, an unresponsive civilian refusing to comply with security directives. Reyes asks through the crackling radio if he wants her to call it up the chain. Chen tells her to stand by. Protocol exists for a reason. In the military, rules aren't suggestions, they're the architecture that keeps chaos from flooding in. Staff Sergeant Chen knew the escalation procedures by heart. Verbal warning, repeated verbal warning, call for backup if non-compliance continues, detain if necessary. But something about this man made Chen hesitate. It wasn't fear. It was the sense that removing this man from his chosen spot would be like pulling a stone from a dam. Chen circles around to get a better angle on the man's face. He's looking for signs, intoxication, mental distress, anything that would explain the behavior. But the man's eyes are clear. His stance is steady. He's not swaying or muttering or displaying any of the typical indicators of someone in crisis. He's just standing there with absolute conviction, like he's keeping watch over something that only he can see. Chen asks again what the man's business here is. The old man's answer is simple: keeping a promise. When Chen presses for what promise, the man doesn't answer immediately. His eyes narrow slightly, scanning the base perimeter with methodical precision, left to right, pausing at specific points, then returning to center. Inside the security booth, Reyes watches the interaction on her monitors. She's seen plenty of strange behavior in her 2 years at this post. Photographers trying to get shots of classified aircraft, protesters angry about military budgets, lost tourists who ignored the warning signs, even the occasional drunk who wandered too close after last call at the bars off base. But this is different. The man on her screen isn't trying to get closer. He's not attempting to breach anything. He's just standing there, and somehow that's more unsettling than if he'd been aggressive. She zooms in one of the cameras, bringing the old man's face into sharper focus. The digital zoom isn't perfect, but it's good enough to see the expression etched into his features. It's not the face of someone looking for trouble. It's the face of someone who's found something he's been searching for. She picks up her radio and asks Chen if he wants her to run the guy's plates, see if there's a vehicle registered to him nearby. Chen responds that the man appears to have walked here, no vehicle in sight. Back at the fence line, the afternoon heat continues to build. The old man hasn't moved an inch. Sweat darkens the back of his grey shirt, but he doesn't seem to notice or care. Chen can feel his own uniform sticking to his skin, but he maintains his position. The staff sergeant has been in the military long enough to recognize a fellow service member, even decades after they've left active duty. It's something in the posture, the way the spine stays straight even in stillness, the way the shoulders settle at a particular angle. This man had worn a uniform once. Chen would bet his next paycheck on it. He tries a different approach, asking the old man if he served. The question hangs in the air for a long moment. Then, slowly, the man's head turns. His eyes meet Chen's, and there's something in that gaze that makes the staff sergeant's breath catch. It's not just confirmation that the man was military. It's the look of someone who saw things that never leave, who carries weight that never gets lighter. The old man nods once, barely a movement at all. Chen asks what branch, trying to build rapport, trying to find common ground that might make this situation easier to resolve. The response comes in a single word, rough and weighted with decades. Navy. Chen nods, processing this. A Navy veteran at a naval air station. That explains some of the intensity with which the man studies the base. This was his world once, or someplace like it. But it doesn't explain why he won't move, why he's standing in a restricted zone, why he seems to be waiting for something. Chen glances back at the security booth, then at the access road beyond. No traffic at the moment, no approaching vehicles requiring clearance. It's just him, Reyes, in the booth, and this stubborn old man who's become a problem that protocol demands be resolved. He asks when the man served, keeping his voice conversational now, less authoritative. The old man's jaw works for a moment before he answers. Vietnam era, he says. Flu rescue operations. The words come out flat, factual, but Chen hears the universe of experience compressed into those few syllables. A rescue swimmer. Chen's estimation of the man shifts again. Those guys were legends, dropping into hostile waters to pull downed pilots from the ocean, operating in conditions that would make most people freeze with terror. The old man standing before him had once been that kind of brave, that kind of crazy, that kind of necessary. But even legends have to follow security protocols. Chen tells the man he respects his service, truly does. But that respect doesn't change the fact that he's in a restricted area and needs to move back. The man's expression doesn't change. He appreciates Chen's respect, he says, but he's not moving. Not yet. Chen asks what he's waiting for, what could be so important that he's willing to be detained or worse. The old man's eyes drift back to the gate, to the tarmac beyond, to the aircraft sitting in their precise rows. He's waiting to see if he's right, the man says quietly. Right about what? Chen presses. Before the old man can answer, Reyes's voice crackles urgently through Chen's radio. She's got movement on the north perimeter camera, something that doesn't look right. A vehicle that shouldn't be there. Chen's attention splits instantly, professional training overriding everything else. He tells Reyes to specify, to give him details. She describes a dark panel van, no markings, that's pulled up to a maintenance access point on the north fence line. It's just sitting there, engine running. She's trying to zoom in for plates, but the angle's wrong. Chen's mind races through possibilities. Could be maintenance personnel, though they'd typically be logged in advance. Could be a contractor who took a wrong turn. Could be nothing. But his gut tells him it's not nothing. He asks Reyes if she's contacted the main security office. She confirms she's calling it in now. Chen looks at the old man, frustration building. He needs to move this guy out of the area so he can focus on the potential threat at the north perimeter. But the old man is staring at him now with an expression that stops Chen cold. The old man asks quietly if the vehicle is at Maintenance Access 7. Chen's blood goes cold. That's exactly where it is. How would this man know that? Reyes confirms through the radio that yes, it's Maintenance Access 7. The old man nods slowly, like something he feared has been confirmed. He tells Chen that's why he's here, that's why he couldn't move. Chen demands to know what the man means, what he knows. The old man's voice drops even lower, urgent now. That access point has been a vulnerability for 30 years. He wrote reports about it when he was stationed here in the 80s. They never fixed it. Someone finally figured it out. Chen's radio explodes with chatter, multiple units responding. The van at the north perimeter is now actively cutting through the fence. This is an active breach. This is real. Chen's hand goes to his sidearm, his body moving into combat readiness. He shouts at the old man to get down, to get away from the fence line. But the man doesn't move. He's staring at Gate 7 with fierce intensity, his body coiled like he's preparing for something. Then it happens. The alarm tears through the afternoon air, a piercing wail that signals base-wide lockdown. Red lights begin flashing on every gate, every barrier, every security checkpoint. The electronic locks on Gate 7 engage with a heavy metallic clunk. Reyes bursts from the security booth, weapon drawn, moving into defensive position. Chen's radio is chaos now, reports coming in from multiple locations, commands being issued, units mobilizing. And through it all, The old man stands perfectly still at his chosen spot, 30 feet from Gate 7, his eyes locked on the base beyond. His lips move in what might be a prayer or might be a promise. Chen realizes with sudden, terrifying clarity that this man wasn't just a random veteran visiting old memories. He was here for a reason. He knew something was going to happen. The question was, how? And more importantly, what else did he know? As sirens scream and red lights paint the world in urgent pulses, Chen makes a decision that goes against every protocol he's been taught. Instead of removing the old man from the area, he moves closer to him, because sometimes, in the chaos of crisis, the person who refuses to leave is exactly the person you need. The old man's weathered face turns toward Chen one more time. In his eyes, there's no triumph at being right, only grim determination. And something else, something that looks like he's been carrying this moment with him for decades, waiting for it, dreading it, preparing for it. Whatever is happening at Maintenance Access 7, whatever threat is breaching the north perimeter, this old man saw it coming, and he positioned himself at Gate 7 for a reason that Chen is only beginning to understand. The alarm screams on. The afternoon has shattered into emergency, and the old man who wouldn't move has become the center of everything that's about to unfold. The world narrows to sirens and flashing lights and the metallic taste of adrenaline. Chen's training takes over, his body moving through practiced responses, even as his mind races to process what's happening. Active breach, north perimeter, unidentified vehicle, fence cutting. And this old man who somehow knew it was coming. Reyes is already on her radio, coordinating with base security. Her voice cuts through the chaos with practiced precision, calling out codes and locations. The procedure is automatic. Lock down all gates. Secure all entry points. Scramble response teams to the breach site. Every person on this base has trained for this moment, hoped they'd never see it, and now executes with the efficiency that keeps people alive. Chen grabs his radio and reports his position at Gate 7. He confirms the gate is locked and secured. He's about to report the unresponsive civilian when something makes him pause. The old man isn't panicking. He isn't ducking for cover or backing away or showing any of the normal civilian responses to a base-wide emergency. Instead, he's watching. His head turns slightly, tracking something beyond the fence that Chen can't see yet. The man's shoulders are tense, but his hands are steady. He looks like a soldier waiting for the enemy to show themselves. Chen makes a split-second decision. He steps closer to the old man, close enough that they can speak without shouting over the alarms. He asks again, urgently now, how the man knew about Maintenance Access 7. The old man's eyes don't leave the base interior. His voice comes out level, almost calm despite the screaming sirens. He served here from 1982 to 1985. He was part of base security review after a training accident exposed gaps in the perimeter. Maintenance Access 7 was identified as a critical vulnerability. Too isolated, insufficient camera coverage, fence line too close to the tree line providing concealment. He personally submitted 3 separate reports recommending enhanced security measures. Nothing was ever done. Budget constraints, they said. Low priority, they said. Chen processes this rapidly. If what the man is saying is true, he has knowledge of base security that goes back decades. Knowledge that might be exactly what they need right now. Chen asks what else the man knows, what else he remembers about that access point. The old man finally looks at Chen, and there's a sharpness in his gaze that cuts through the years. If someone breaches at Access 7, they're not trying to get onto the base randomly. That point gives direct line of sight to the fuel depot. It's 300 yards from the maintenance access to the underground fuel storage that feeds the entire flight line. Chen's stomach drops. The fuel depot. If someone wanted to cripple this base, damage aircraft, create maximum chaos and destruction, that would be the target. He immediately radios this information to Reyes. tells her to relay to command that the breach at Maintenance Access 7 may be targeting the fuel depot. Reyes acknowledges, her voice tight with the weight of what that means. The radio chatter intensifies. Commands are being rerouted. Units that were moving to simply intercept the breach are now racing to protect critical infrastructure. A convoy of security vehicles screams past Gate 7, heading north toward the breach point. Humvees with mounted weapons, their lights flashing red and blue. Chen can hear the change in engine pitch as they accelerate. The old man watches them pass with an expression that's hard to read. Not satisfaction exactly, but something like grim validation. Chen asks his name. The man hesitates for just a moment, then answers. William Ashford. People called him Ash. Chen introduces himself properly now, tells Ash that he needs him to move back to the security booth where it's safer. Ash shakes his head. He's staying right here. Chen asks why. What possible reason he has to stay at this specific spot when there's an active breach on the other side of the base. Ash's answer chills Chen to the bone. Because if they're smart, the breach at Access 7 is a diversion. The real threat is here. Chen's hand moves instinctively to his weapon. He asks what Ash means. Ash explains quickly, his voice carrying the authority of someone who's thought this through. If you study this base, really study it, you learn that Gate 7 is the weak point. It's away from main security, minimal personnel, primarily used for cargo and contractor access. More importantly, it's the closest gate to the command building. You breach at Access 7 to draw response away, then you hit Gate 7 when it's undermanned. You get through here, you're 200 yards from base command. Chen's mind reels. He looks at his position with new eyes. Gate 7 suddenly feels exposed. Vulnerable. But even as he reaches for his radio, Ash grabs his arm. The old man's grip is surprisingly strong. He tells Chen to wait, to listen. For a moment, Chen hears nothing but the alarms and distant shouts and the rumble of vehicles. Then, underneath all of that, something else, an engine, growing louder, coming from the access road that leads to Gate 7. Ash releases Chen's arm and points. Through the heat, shimmer and afternoon glare, a vehicle is approaching, not from the base side, but from outside. A white commercial truck, the kind used for deliveries. It's moving too fast for a normal approach. Chen's training kicks in hard. He shouts to Reyes that they have an approaching vehicle, possible hostile. Reyes emerges from the booth with her rifle, taking position behind the concrete barrier. Chen draws his sidearm and moves to intercept position, placing himself between the approaching truck and the gate. His voice booms out, commanding the vehicle to stop, to show hands to identify themselves. The truck doesn't slow down. If anything, it accelerates. Ash moves then, faster than a man his age should be able to move. He doesn't run toward cover. He runs toward the gate itself, positioning himself at an angle where he can see both the approaching truck and the gate mechanism. He's making himself a human observation post. Chen shouts at him to get clear, to get to cover. Ash ignores him completely. The truck is 100 yards out now, 75. Chen can see the driver, male, dark clothing, face obscured by sunglasses. No passenger visible, but the truck's cargo area is enclosed. Could be empty, could be carrying anything. 50 yards. Chen's finger moves to the trigger guard. Every instinct screams that this is wrong, this is threat, this is the moment. Reyes has her rifle trained on the driver's side windshield. Her voice is steady as she calls out the distance. 40 yards, 35. Chen makes the call. He fires a warning shot into the ground 20 feet in front of the truck. The crack of the gunshot cuts through even the alarms. The truck swerves slightly but doesn't stop. 25 yards. Chen prepares to fire again, this time aiming for the engine block. His radio is screaming with commands from base security. Hold that gate. Do not allow breach. Backup is 2 minutes out. Then Ash does something that makes no tactical sense. He steps forward, directly into the truck's path, and raises both hands, not in surrender, in signal. His hands move in specific patterns, military hand signals that Chen recognizes. Stop. Identify. Threat assessment. The truck driver sees him. For a split second, the truck wavers. The driver's head turns, looking at this old man in the road, making hand signals that shouldn't mean anything to a civilian. But they do mean something. The truck slams on its brakes. The tires scream against asphalt. It skids to a stop 15 yards from the gate. The driver's door opens, and a man stumbles out, hands raised, shouting. He's yelling that he's not a threat, that he's trying to deliver to the wrong gate, that he got confused by the GPS. His voice is panicked, genuine fear making it crack. Chen keeps his weapon trained on the man, but something in his gut tells him this is legitimate. The terror in the driver's voice isn't faked. Reyes moves to secure the driver, while Chen approaches the truck carefully, checking the cargo area. It's full of office supplies, boxes of paper, printer toner, the mundane materials that keep a base functioning, not explosives, not weapons, just a driver who picked the worst possible moment to get lost. Chen's heart is hammering. He secures the scene, confirms the driver's credentials, runs a quick check that comes back clean. It's exactly what it appears to be. Wrong place, catastrophically wrong time. He radios the all clear for Gate 7, even as his mind tries to catch up with what just happened. The old man walks back from where he stood in the truck's path. Chen rounds on him, demanding to know what Ash was thinking, stepping out like that. Ash meets his eyes calmly. It wasn't a threat, he says simply. Chen asks how he could possibly know that. Ash explains that he watched the approach. The speed was wrong for an attack. Too slow at first, then panicked acceleration when the driver saw the gate was locked and realized his mistake. An attacker would have come fast from the start or would have approached cautiously to assess defenses. This driver was confused, not tactical. Before Chen can process this, new radio traffic comes through. The breach at Maintenance Access 7 has been contained. 2 suspects in custody. The van was stopped before it reached the fence line, intercepted by security forces. Early reports suggest the suspects were conducting surveillance, possibly planning a future attack, but not executing one today. The immediate threat is neutralized. Chen sags slightly, the tension draining, but questions pile up like debris after a storm. He looks at Ash. Really looks at him. This man showed up at Gate 7 before anything happened. He identified the vulnerability at Maintenance Access 7 without being told. He predicted a possible diversionary tactic. He read the delivery truck situation with veteran expertise. None of this is coincidence. Chen asks the question that's been building. How did Ash know? Ash is quiet for a long moment. The sirens have stopped. The red lights still flash, but slower now, less urgent. Ash tells Chen he didn't know for certain. He couldn't have. But he's been watching. For years, he's been watching. Ash explains that after he left active duty, after his reports about security vulnerabilities were ignored, he never really left this place behind. He lives 30 miles from here. 3 weeks ago, he heard something. Just rumors in online forums where old military guys trade stories. Someone was asking questions about base security at Oceana. Specific questions about access points, shift changes, vehicle protocols. The kind of questions that might be innocent research or might be threat assessment. Ash started coming to Gate 7. Not every day, just sometimes. Watching. Looking for anything unusual. He knew the anniversary was coming. September 11th. He knew that date makes every military installation tighten security, but it also makes them targets. So he came today. He stood at Gate 7 because his gut told him that if something was going to happen, it would happen here. A senior officer's vehicle pulls up to Gate 7, lights flashing. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Hayes emerges, her face set in hard lines. She's base security chief, and she's just come from the breach site. She demands to know what happened here. Chen gives his report, concise and professional. Hayes listens, her expression unreadable. Then she turns to Ash. She asks who he is and what he's doing at a secured military gate during a base-wide emergency. Ash gives his name, rank, years of service. He explains his presence calmly, without defensiveness. Hayes's expression shifts as she listens. She asks if he's the William Ashford who submitted the security reports in the 80s. Ash confirms he is. Hayes studies him for a long moment. Then she tells Chen to bring Ashford into the security building, not as a suspect, as a consultant. Because if what happened today was reconnaissance for a larger attack, they need someone who thinks like Ash thinks, who sees vulnerabilities that official reports miss. As they walk toward the security vehicle, Ash pauses at the yellow line he refused to cross earlier. He looks back at Gate 7, at the fence he stood guard over. Chen asks quietly what promise he was talking about earlier, what kept him standing there. Ash's answer is simple and devastating. He made a promise to a friend who died here in 1984, a training accident that happened because security protocols failed. He promised he'd never let this place become vulnerable again. He promised he'd be watching. They climb into the security vehicle. Hayes takes the wheel. As they drive toward the command building, passing the orderly rows of aircraft and the hurrying personnel, Ash watches everything. Still vigilant, still on watch, still keeping promises made decades ago to people who are gone, but never forgotten. The security building sits at the heart of Naval Air Station Oceana, a concrete and steel structure that radiates authority and purpose. Hayes's vehicle pulls into a restricted parking area where armed sentries stand at attention, their faces sharp with the residual tension of the emergency. The base has stood down from full lockdown, but remains at heightened alert, every person moving with increased vigilance, every shadow scrutinized with fresh suspicion. Inside, the building hums with controlled urgency. Personnel move through hallways with folders and tablets, their voices clipped and professional. Hayes leads Ash and Chen past security checkpoints where guards verify credentials with extra scrutiny. They take an elevator to the third floor, emerge into a corridor lined with offices, bearing titles like Base Security Operations and Threat Assessment Division. At the end of the hall, Hayes opens a door marked Conference Room B and gestures them inside. The room is functional and austere, a long table surrounded by chairs. Screens mounted on the walls, showing live feeds from various points around the base. A map of the entire installation covering one wall, marked with colored pins and zones. Hayes closes the door, and the sounds of the busy hallway fade to a muffled background hum. She gestures for Ash to sit. Chen takes a position near the door, uncertain of his role in whatever is about to unfold. Hayes remains standing, her arms crossed, studying Ash with an intensity that would make most people uncomfortable. Ash meets her gaze evenly, patient and unruffled. The silence stretches for a long moment before Hayes speaks. She tells him they ran his name through the system the moment Chen reported his presence at Gate 7. William James Ashford, aviation rescue swimmer. Served 1978 to 1986, 2 tours in the Pacific, stationed at Oceana from 1982 to 1985. Honorable discharge, multiple commendations for valor, and yes, 3 separate security assessment reports filed during his tenure here, all flagging vulnerabilities that were never addressed. Ash nods slowly, acknowledging that she's done her homework. Hayes continues. She tells him that what happened today wasn't random. The 2 suspects detained at Maintenance Access 7 are being interrogated now. Preliminary information suggests they're part of a group that's been surveilling multiple military installations along the East Coast. Their vehicle contains surveillance equipment, detailed maps of the base perimeter, and documentation, suggesting they've been planning this for months. But here's what troubles her. They were intercepted before they actually breached the fence. They were caught in the act of preparation, not execution. Hayes leans forward, her hands flat on the table. She asks Ash how he knew. How did a retired veteran living 30 miles away know that today, this specific day, would be the day someone tried something at this base? Ash's expression doesn't change, but something flickers in his eyes. Not defensiveness, but the weight of having to explain instinct, having to put words to the kind of knowing that comes from decades of experience. He tells Hayes about the online chatter. 3 weeks ago, he was browsing a veterans forum where old Navy guys trade sea stories and compare notes about their service. Someone posted asking very specific questions about current security procedures at Oceana. The questions were framed as innocent curiosity, as someone writing a research paper or doing historical documentation. But the specificity was wrong. Questions about shift changes at perimeter gates. Questions about camera blind spots. Questions about response times when alarms are triggered. The kind of questions that serve no legitimate purpose. Ash says he flagged it to his old commanding officer who still had contacts in base security. But the post was taken down before anyone could trace it. No follow-up, no investigation. The username was generic, untraceable. It disappeared into the digital void. But Ash couldn't let it go. He started watching the base from outside, driving by different access points at different times, looking for anything unusual. He didn't see anything concrete. Just a feeling, just his gut, telling him that someone was circling, probing, looking for weakness. Hayes asks why he didn't come forward officially, why he didn't contact base security directly. Ash's answer is simple and tinged with old frustration. He tried that 30 years ago. He wrote detailed reports about security vulnerabilities. He documented risks. He made recommendations. And nothing changed. He learned that sometimes the system moves too slowly to prevent disaster. Sometimes you have to position yourself where you can act when the system fails. Chen speaks up from his position by the door, asking Ash about the September 11th connection. Ash turns to look at him. The anniversary, Ash explains. Military installations always tighten security around significant dates. Pearl Harbor Day, 9/11 Memorial Day. But that heightened security also draws attention. It broadcasts that we're expecting something. For certain kinds of people, that's not a deterrent. It's a challenge. They want to prove they can strike even when we're watching. So Ash knew that if someone was planning something, a significant anniversary would be when they'd try. Hayes absorbs this, her expression calculating. She tells Ash that his instincts may have saved lives today. The suspects at Maintenance Access 7 had materials in their vehicle that suggest they were building toward something larger than surveillance. Fertilizer, detonation cord. Not enough to build a bomb on site, but enough to suggest they were testing procedures before a larger operation. If Ash hadn't been at Gate 7, if he hadn't identified the fuel depot as the likely target and allowed security to position resources accordingly, the response might have been slower. Minutes matter in situations like this. His vigilance gave them those minutes, but Hayes isn't finished. She asks Ash about his friend, the one who died in the 1984 training accident. She wants to know about the promise he mentioned. Ash is quiet for a long moment, his eyes distant. When he speaks, his voice carries the weight of old grief. His friend's name was Marcus Reed. They served together as rescue swimmers, brothers in the most fundamental way. Marcus was the guy who jumped first, who went deeper, who never hesitated when someone needed saving. In April of 1984, there was a training exercise that went wrong. A helicopter experienced mechanical failure during a simulated rescue operation. The bird went down in the bay. Marcus was in the water, already executing the rescue when the helicopter hit. He managed to get 2 crew members to safety before going back for the pilot. The fuel had spread across the water surface. Marcus knew it was dangerous. He went anyway. Ash's voice catches almost imperceptibly. Marcus got the pilot out, but didn't make it back himself. The official report called it a training accident, mechanical failure, unavoidable tragedy. But Ash knew better. He'd reviewed the helicopter's maintenance logs. That bird had been flagged for issues 2 weeks before the accident. Budget constraints delayed the repairs. Someone made a calculated decision that the risk was acceptable. They were wrong. Marcus paid for that decision with his life. After Marcus died, Ash threw himself into security assessments. He documented every vulnerability he could find, every shortcut that put lives at risk, every place where budget constraints created dangerous gaps. He submitted his reports through proper channels. Some were acknowledged. None were acted upon. When his enlistment ended in 1986, he left the Navy, but he never left that promise behind. He promised Marcus that he wouldn't let laziness or budget limitations or bureaucratic indifference create another situation where good people died for preventable reasons. The room is heavy with the weight of Ash's words. Hayes sits down for the first time, the rigid command posture softening slightly. She tells Ash that she read about that accident when she took over base security. The report was sanitized, clinical, all sharp edges smoothed away by official language. But she could read between the lines. She knew there were failures in the chain of decisions that led to that day. She's been working to address legacy vulnerabilities since she arrived here 2 years ago. But there's always more to fix than there are resources to fix it with. Ash nods slowly. He knows that reality. He's not naive enough to think one person can solve systemic problems. But he also knows that one person keeping watch, one person refusing to look away, can make the difference when crisis comes. That's what he was doing at Gate 7, keeping watch, making sure that if something happened, someone would be there who remembered, who cared, who wouldn't let another Marcus Reed sacrifice be wasted. Hayes stands and walks to the map on the wall. She traces the perimeter with one finger, stopping at Gate 7, then at Maintenance Access 7. She tells Ash that his assessment was correct about the diversionary tactic. The suspect's plan, as far as they've been able to piece together from initial interrogation, was exactly what Ash predicted. Create a visible breach at Access 7 to draw security response, then exploit the reduced coverage at Gate 7 to access the base interior. They had studied the layout, they knew the response patterns, they were counting on institutional predictability. What they didn't count on, Hayes says, was a stubborn old Navy veteran who refused to move from his post, who saw the pattern they were trying to exploit, who positioned himself exactly where he needed to be to disrupt their timing. The delivery truck that approached Gate 7 during the chaos, that was legitimate, just terrible timing. But if there had been a second vehicle, a real threat taking advantage of the confusion, Ash would have been the only person in position to identify it before it got through. Chen asks the question that's been building in his mind. He asks if Ash knew he might die at that gate. If there had been a real attack, if hostile forces had come while the base was responding to the diversion, Ash would have been exposed and alone, an unarmed civilian standing in the path of people willing to kill. Ash turns to look at Chen, and something in his expression answers before his words do. He tells Chen that rescue swimmers train for a specific mindset. You calculate the risk, but you don't let it stop you. Someone needs help, you go. The water might kill you, but leaving them to die certainly will. At Gate 7, it wasn't about whether he might die. It was about whether his being there might save others. Hayes makes a decision. She tells Ash that she wants to contract him as a security consultant. Unofficial at first, she'll need to work through bureaucracy to make it official. But she needs someone who thinks like he thinks, who sees the base through the lens of lived experience rather than just procedural manuals. She needs someone who cares enough to stand at a gate for hours in the heat because of a promise made to a dead friend. That kind of dedication can't be manufactured or trained into people. Ash considers this carefully. He asks what she's really asking. Hayes is direct. She tells him she wants him to do what he's already been doing: watch, assess, identify vulnerabilities. But she wants him to do it from inside the system now, with access and authority. She wants his knowledge of this base's history combined with current threat assessments. She wants the perspective of someone who's been on both sides, active duty and civilian, insider and outsider. Before Ash can respond, an urgent knock on the door interrupts. A young lieutenant enters, her face flushed. She reports that the interrogation of the suspects has revealed something critical. This wasn't an isolated operation. The suspects are part of a larger network that's been targeting military installations systematically. Oceana was a test case. They were gathering intelligence for future operations at other bases. The information they've collected has likely been shared with others in their network. Hayes's expression hardens. She asks if the suspects have revealed the identities of their network contacts. The lieutenant shakes her head. They're not talking beyond the basics. But digital forensics found encrypted communications on devices seized from their vehicle. It will take time to break the encryption, time during which other installations may be vulnerable. Hayes turns to Ash. She tells him that whatever his answer about the consulting position, she needs his help right now. The suspects were studying this base for months. They identified vulnerabilities that current security assessments might have missed. She needs Ash to walk the perimeter with her security team. She needs him to show them what he sees, what his experience tells him are the next most likely targets. Not just at Oceana, but at any base with similar layouts. Ash stands slowly, his weathered frame straightening to attention in a way that transcends age. He tells Hayes he doesn't need time to think about her offer. He's been consulting for free for years. He'll take the position. He'll do whatever is needed to protect this base and others like it. Because the promise he made to Marcus wasn't just about one gate at one installation. It was about never letting preventable failures cost lives, anywhere, ever. Hayes extends her hand. Ash shakes it, the grip firm and certain. Chen watches this exchange and understands that he's witnessing something rare, the moment when institutional authority recognizes and embraces the kind of dedication that exists outside normal hierarchies, the kind of service that doesn't end when the uniform comes off. Hayes tells them they start immediately. There's a security briefing in 30 minutes where Ash will present his assessment to the full command staff. After that, they'll conduct a comprehensive perimeter review. Every gate, every access point, every vulnerability that Ash's experience identifies will be documented and prioritized. The near miss today isn't going to be wasted. It's going to be the catalyst for the changes that should have happened 30 years ago. As they file out of the conference room, Ash pauses to look back at the map on the wall. Gate 7 is marked with a red pin now, highlighted as the critical point in today's incident. He stares at it for a moment, and in his eyes, Chen sees the ghosts of promises kept and the weight of vigilance that never ends. Then Ash turns and follows Hayes down the corridor, ready to translate decades of watching into action that will protect people he'll never meet from threats that haven't yet emerged. The old man who wouldn't move from the gate is moving now, but his purpose remains exactly the same, standing watch over those who serve, keeping promises to those who fell, ensuring that vigilance outlasts memory. The command briefing room fills quickly. Officers and senior enlisted personnel file in with the quiet efficiency of people who've spent careers responding to crises. They take seats around a U-shaped table configured to face a large screen at the front of the room. The energy in the space is tightly controlled. No panic, no chaos, but an undercurrent of intense focus. What happened today was contained, but everyone in this room knows how close they came to something catastrophic. Hayes stands at the front, tablet in hand, waiting as the last personnel enter and find their places. Ash sits off to the side, not at the main table, but in a chair positioned where he can see everyone and be seen. He's removed his worn baseball cap, his white hair catching the overhead lights. Chen notices how some of the younger officers glance at Ash with curiosity, perhaps wondering who this civilian is and why he's present for a classified security briefing. The base commander enters last. Captain Robert Mendoza is a career naval aviator with 30 years of service etched into the lines around his eyes. He commands respect without demanding it, moving through the room with the quiet authority of someone who's led people through actual combat, not just training exercises. He takes his seat at the head of the table and nods to Hayes to begin. Hayes wastes no time on pleasantries. She pulls up imagery on the main screen, aerial shots of the base perimeter with Maintenance Access 7 and Gate 7 highlighted. She walks through the timeline of today's events with clinical precision. At 14:20 hours, surveillance cameras detected a white panel van approaching Maintenance Access 7. At 14:23, the vehicle stopped and two suspects exited with tools consistent with fence-cutting equipment. At 14:24, base-wide alarm was triggered and lockdown initiated. At 14:26, security forces intercepted the suspects before breach was completed. Both individuals are now in custody. She continues, explaining what was found in the suspect's vehicle. Surveillance equipment, detailed maps not just of Oceania, but of 3 other naval installations along the coast, encrypted communication devices, and materials that forensics confirms were components for improvised explosive devices, though not in sufficient quantity to assemble a functional weapon on site. The assessment is clear. This was reconnaissance for a larger operation. They were testing response times, security protocols, looking for the gaps they could exploit when they returned with serious intent. Mendoza leans forward, his expression grave. He asks about the encrypted communications. Have they been broken? Hayes shakes her head. Not yet. The encryption is sophisticated, likely military grade. It will take days, possibly weeks to crack, which means they have to operate on the assumption that whatever intelligence these suspects gathered has already been shared with others in their network. Other bases may be targeted using similar tactics. One of the officers asks the question everyone's thinking. How did 2 civilians with no apparent military training identify vulnerabilities that professional security assessments missed? Hayes's answer is unexpected. She tells them that the vulnerabilities weren't missed. They were documented 30 years ago and never addressed. She gestures to Ash. This is William Ashford, retired Navy rescue swimmer who served at this installation from 1982 to 1985. He identified Maintenance Access 7 as a critical security gap in reports filed during his service. Those reports were acknowledged but not acted upon due to budget constraints and competing priorities. The room shifts uncomfortably. No one likes being told that today's crisis could have been prevented by listening to warnings from decades past. But Hayes isn't finished. She tells them that Ash was present at Gate 7 when the alarm sounded. He predicted the diversionary tactic. He identified that Maintenance Access 7's true value as a breach point was its line of sight to the fuel depot. His assessment allowed security forces to position resources to protect critical infrastructure while still responding to the immediate threat. His knowledge and instincts directly contributed to the successful containment of today's incident. Mendoza studies Ash with renewed interest. He asks Ash directly why he was at Gate 7 today. Ash's answer is the same he's given before, but hearing it in this formal setting gives it different weight. He explains the online chatter, the specific questions that raised his suspicions, his decision to maintain visual surveillance of the base in the weeks leading up to September 11th. He tells them about Marcus Reed, about the promise made over a friend's grave, about refusing to let institutional inertia create conditions where good people die for preventable reasons. The room is silent when Ash finishes. These are people who understand sacrifice, who've made their own promises to fallen comrades. They recognize authentic dedication when they hear it. One of the senior officers, a weathered master chief with hash marks covering half his sleeve, speaks up. He asks Ash what else he sees, what other vulnerabilities exist that they might be missing. Ash doesn't hesitate. He's had decades to think about this. He tells them that Gate 7 remains a critical weak point, despite today's response. It's isolated, undermanned, and provides direct access to the command building. The delivery truck that approached during the chaos today was innocent, but it revealed how easily a hostile vehicle could exploit the confusion of an emergency. He recommends permanent barriers that prevent vehicle approach without prior clearance, upgraded camera systems with thermal imaging, and increasing personnel assignment to 2 guards minimum at all times. Ash continues, walking them through a mental map of the base built from years of observation. He identifies 3 other access points along the western perimeter where tree coverage and terrain provide concealment for approach. He talks about the gaps in patrol routes, the predictable timing of shift changes, the places where security relies too heavily on technology that can be defeated by anyone with basic knowledge of systems. He speaks with the authority of someone who studied this place not from briefing documents, but from lived experience, who knows it the way you know your own home. Hayes adds context to Ash's assessments. She pulls up current security protocols and shows how they've evolved, or in some cases haven't evolved, since the 1980s. Some of Ash's original recommendations were partially implemented but never completed. Others were documented as pending future review and then forgotten as personnel rotated and institutional memory faded. The result is a security posture that's adequate for routine operations, but vulnerable to determined adversaries who do their homework. Mendoza makes a decision. He tells Hayes to implement Ash's recommendations immediately, starting with Gate 7. Authorization to exceed normal budget constraints is granted. This is now a security priority that overrides standard procurement procedures. He wants barriers installed within 48 hours. He wants camera upgrades within a week. He wants a complete perimeter review conducted with Ash's participation, and he wants recommendations from that review on his desk in 10 days. Then Mendoza turns to Ash directly. He thanks him for his service, both past and present. He tells Ash that the Navy failed him 30 years ago by not listening to his warnings. That failure is not Ash's burden to carry, but he's carried it anyway. The commander tells Ash that he's being officially retained as a security consultant with full access to base facilities and classified briefings relevant to his work. This is no longer unofficial or provisional. This is recognition that sometimes the most valuable expertise exists outside the normal chain of command. The briefing shifts to operational details. Interrogation updates, coordination with other installations, threat assessment protocols. Ash listens but doesn't participate. This is the world of active duty personnel executing their mission. His role is finished for now. He's given them what they needed, his knowledge, his perspective, his stubborn refusal to let old promises die. As the briefing concludes and personnel begin to file out, several officers approach Ash. A young lieutenant introduces herself as the security officer who oversees Gate 7. She thanks Ash personally, tells him that she's been requesting upgrades to that position for 6 months, but couldn't get traction. His intervention today gave her the justification she needed. Ash nods, accepting her gratitude with quiet grace. The Master Chief, who spoke earlier, hangs back until most others have left. He extends his hand to Ash and introduces himself. Command Master Chief David Torres, 32 years in the Navy. He tells Ash that he served with Marcus Reed briefly in 1983, before Ash arrived at the station. Marcus was one of the best, Torres says, a man who made everyone around him better just by how he carried himself. Torres tells Ash that Marcus would be proud of what he did today, proud that the promise made at his grave is still being kept decades later. Ash's composure cracks slightly at this. His eyes glisten, but no tears fall. He thanks Torres for remembering Marcus, for speaking his name. In military culture, being remembered is its own form of immortality. Marcus Reed died in 1984, but he's alive in this moment, his influence rippling forward through time in the form of security improvements that will protect people who never knew his name. Hayes approaches as the room empties. She tells Ash that she's arranging credentials and access for him, that he'll be able to come and go from the base as needed for his consulting work. She also tells him that she's reached out to security chiefs at the 3 other installations whose maps were found in the suspect's vehicle. They want to hear from him, want his assessment of their vulnerabilities. His vigilance isn't just protecting Oceana anymore, it's expanding to cover a wider area of responsibility. Ash absorbs this information quietly. He asks Hayes if she understands what she's asking. She's asking him to relive his service, to walk perimeters and identify risks, to carry the weight of knowing that his assessments might mean the difference between life and death. He's 70 years old. He's tired. The promise he made to Marcus has cost him relationships, consumed his retirement, kept him focused on protecting a place he left decades ago. Is she sure she wants to ask him to expand that burden? Hayes' answer is direct and honest. She tells Ash that she wouldn't ask if she didn't believe it was necessary. The threat landscape has changed. Adversaries are sophisticated, patient, willing to study targets for months or years before striking. Traditional security assessments are valuable, but they're conducted by people who rotate through positions every few years, who don't have the deep institutional knowledge that comes from living with a place over decades. Ash has something they can't replicate. He has continuity. He has memory. He has the kind of commitment that doesn't clock out at the end of a shift. She also tells him that he won't do this alone. She's assembling a team, active duty security specialists who will work with him, learn from him, help carry the burden of vigilance. His knowledge will be transferred to people who can continue the work after he's gone. The promise to Marcus Reed won't die with Ash. It will become institutional, embedded in the culture of how these bases approach security. Ash considers this for a long moment. Then he nods. He'll do it. He'll assess the other bases, share what he sees, help build the kind of security posture that makes it harder for determined adversaries to find gaps. He'll do it because the promise was never just about one friend or one base. It was about preventing preventable deaths, anywhere, always. Chen has remained quietly observant throughout the briefing and its aftermath. As Ash and Hayes finalize details, Chen realizes he's witnessed something profound. An old man standing at a gate transformed into a security consultant whose expertise is suddenly invaluable. A promise made at a graveside becoming the foundation for institutional change. A near miss becoming the catalyst for corrections that are 30 years overdue. Hayes escorts Ash out of the building. As they walk through the corridors, personnel they pass glance at the old man with the weathered face and begin to understand who he is. Word has already spread through the base. The civilian who predicted the attack, who stood his ground at Gate 7, who carried warnings from the past into the present and made people listen. In military culture, stories move fast. By tomorrow, everyone on this base will know Ash's name. By next week, the legend will have grown beyond the facts. But the core truth will remain. One man's refusal to let go of a promise saved lives today. They emerge into late afternoon sunlight. The base has returned to normal operations, but with heightened vigilance. Guards at every checkpoint stand a little straighter. Cameras are being reviewed with extra scrutiny. Patrols have increased frequency. The near miss has sharpened everyone's awareness. They came close to disaster, and now they're determined to ensure it doesn't come closer next time. Hayes walks Ash to the visitor lot, where his truck is parked. Before he leaves, she tells him one final thing. The suspects being interrogated have started talking. They've confirmed that Oceana was chosen specifically because someone in their network had identified it as vulnerable. They studied old security reports, found documentation of unfixed problems, and built their plan around exploiting those known gaps. They thought they were being clever, using institutional inertia against the military. What they didn't account for, Hayes says, was that institutions are made of people, and sometimes one person with enough dedication can overcome decades of inertia. One person keeping watch, one person refusing to forget, one person standing at a gate because a promise demanded it. Ash climbs into his truck, starts the engine, and sits for a moment looking back at the base. Gate 7 is visible in the distance, still marked by the yellow line he refused to cross until the moment demanded action. He thinks about Marcus Reed, about a promise made 40 years ago that's still being kept, about how vigilance doesn't retire, doesn't fade, doesn't end just because time passes. He puts the truck in gear and drives toward the exit. Tomorrow he'll return with credentials and authority. Tomorrow he'll begin the formal work of assessing and improving security. But today he's just an old man who stood at a gate and refused to move, who kept watch, who remembered, who made sure that one more time the promise held. 6 months pass. Like water flowing around stone, winter settles over Virginia, bringing cold winds off the Atlantic that rattle the chain-link fences surrounding Naval Air Station Oceana. The base transforms under the pale December sun, aircraft leaving contrails across grey skies, personnel moving with the brisk efficiency of people working in the cold. Gate 7 has changed. Concrete barriers now channel vehicle approaches into a controlled pattern that eliminates the possibility of a high-speed ram attack. New camera systems with thermal imaging cover every angle, their feeds monitored in a modernized security booth that's been expanded and reinforced. 2 guards are permanently assigned to this position now, never fewer. Above the gate, a small bronze plaque has been mounted. It reads, "In memory of aviation rescue swimmer Marcus Reed, USN, lost April 1984. His dedication to protecting others continues through those who keep watch." Below the dates, a single line, "Vigilance honors the fallen." Ash stands before this plaque on a cold Tuesday morning, his breath forming clouds in the winter air. He wears the same faded jeans and work boots, but now he carries credentials on a lanyard around his neck. Official Department of Defense contractor identification. His truck is parked in a designated consultant space. He comes to the base 3 days a week now, sometimes more when threat assessments require his attention. The work has expanded beyond anything he imagined that September afternoon. After Oceana, he was brought to Naval Station Norfolk, then to Marine Corps Base Quantico, then to 3 Air Force installations. At each location, he walked perimeters with security personnel, pointed out the gaps that only long memory could identify, made recommendations that were actually implemented. His assessments appear in classified security briefings now, his name referenced in documents that cross the desks of officers he'll never meet. But every visit begins here, at Gate 7, standing before the plaque that marks the reason for everything. This is the promise in physical form. This is Marcus Reed's continued presence in the world, not through memory alone, but through concrete changes his death inspired, changes that took 40 years to manifest, but are now woven into how these installations protect themselves. Commander Hayes approaches from the security building, her uniform crisp despite the early hour. She's been promoted since September, the successful handling of the incident and subsequent security overhauls playing no small part in that advancement. She joins Ash at the plaque, standing in respectful silence before speaking. She tells him that the encrypted communications from the September suspects have finally been cracked. The intelligence revealed a network much larger than initially believed. 17 individuals across 6 states, all coordinating reconnaissance on military installations. The FBI has made arrests. Plots that were months or years from execution have been disrupted. And the catalyst was the failure at Oceana. The operation stopped by upgraded security and one stubborn veteran who refused to move from his post. Ash listens, but his focus remains on the plaque. He tells Hayes that he doesn't need gratitude or recognition. The work itself is the point, making sure that people don't die because someone decided a vulnerability was acceptable risk. making sure that promises made at gravesides are kept not just individually, but institutionally. That's the legacy that matters. Hayes understands. She tells Ash that she's implementing a new program, a formal security review process where retired personnel with decades of institutional knowledge are systematically consulted. They're calling it the Reed Protocol, named for the man whose death sparked the original security reports that went ignored for so long. The protocol ensures that historical knowledge doesn't get lost in personnel rotations, that lessons learned at cost are preserved and applied. Ash's expression softens. The Reed Protocol. Marcus's name attached to something that will outlast both of them, that will protect people decades from now. This is how promises become immortal. They stop being personal obligations and become institutional culture. Marcus Reed died in 1984, but through this protocol, his influence will extend far into the future. A young airman approaches, hesitant to interrupt. She's barely 22, her uniform still crisp with newness. Hayes introduces her as Airman First Class Sarah Martinez, part of the new security team being trained in Reed Protocol assessments. Martinez wanted to meet Ash, to understand the history behind the work she's being trained to continue. Martinez tells Ash that her instructors spoke about him during training, about the man who stood at a gate because of a promise, who saw threats that systems missed, who turned personal dedication into institutional change. Ash is uncomfortable with this attention, but he recognizes the opportunity. This young airman represents the future, the generation that will carry the work forward when he's gone. He asks her what she understands about why the Reed Protocol exists. Martinez explains that it exists because institutional memory is fragile, because people rotate through positions and knowledge gets lost. The protocol counteracts that by deliberately preserving and consulting historical knowledge, making sure that lessons learned at cost are never forgotten. Ash nods. She understands the mechanism. But he asks if she understands the purpose, what difference it makes. Martinez considers carefully. Her answer comes slowly, but with conviction. It matters because every vulnerability that goes unaddressed is a risk to real people. Every gap in security is a potential tragedy waiting to happen. The protocol exists to prevent preventable deaths. That's not just procedure, that's moral obligation. Ash's stern expression cracks into something approaching a smile. She gets it. He tells Martinez that she'll do fine. She has the right understanding. Now she just needs to maintain it through years of routine, through the grinding repetition where most days nothing happens and vigilance can start to feel pointless. That's when the protocol matters most. Before they leave for a meeting, Martinez asks if she can photograph the plaque. She wants to remember the name, remember the reason. Ash tells her that photos are fine, but memory is better. Remember that Marcus Reed was a real person, not just a name on bronze. Remember that he had friends who loved him, a future that was cut short because someone decided a risk was acceptable. Remember that every security improvement, every moment of vigilance, is ultimately about preventing another Marcus Reed from dying before his time. Martinez promises she'll remember. She takes her photo and returns to her duties. Ash watches her go. Young, dedicated, carrying forward work that began before she was born. This is how legacies survive. Not through individual heroism, but through ordinary people doing their jobs with extraordinary commitment, day after day, year after year. Later, Hayes pulls Ash aside with news. She's being transferred to the Pentagon, assigned to a security policy development role that will involve creating standardized assessment protocols across all services. The Reed Protocol is being expanded beyond the Navy. The Air Force and Marines are implementing their own versions. Hayes will be coordinating that effort at the national level. She tells Ash that what began as one man standing at one gate because of one promise has become the foundation for how the military services approach security assessment. That's legacy. That's impact that outlives any individual. Ash processes this quietly. He thinks about that September afternoon, about refusing to move from Gate 7, about the alarm sounding and everything that followed. He tells Hayes that Marcus would appreciate the irony. Marcus spent his life pulling people out of dangerous water, saving them from situations they couldn't escape on their own. In death, he's still doing that. His sacrifice creating the foundation for security improvements that will save lives for decades. The work of rescue continues, even when the rescuer is gone. As the day ends, Ash makes one final stop at Gate 7. The evening shift is coming on duty. 2 guards moving through equipment checks and briefing handoff. They acknowledge Ash with nods of recognition. Everyone who works this gate knows who he is now, knows the story of the man who stood here when the alarm sounded. Ash doesn't approach them. He simply stands near the fence line, looking at the base beyond. Aircraft secured for the night. Personnel moving through end-of-day routines. Everything normal, everything safe, everything protected by layers of security that include his contributions. This is what success looks like. Nothing happening, no alarms, no crises, just the quiet assurance that people are watching and threats are being addressed before they manifest as tragedy. Before he reaches his truck, one of the gate guards calls out to him. The young specialist jogs over, slightly breathless. He tells Ash that he's only been at this post for 2 months, but he wanted Ash to know that he takes the assignment seriously. He's read about Marcus Reed, about the 1984 accident, about why this gate matters. He promises that on his watch, no threat will get through undetected. Ash studies the young man, maybe 24 years old, full of earnest dedication. He thanks him for the commitment, tells him that vigilance is a choice made every day, every shift, every hour. The specialist promises he understands. Ash believes him. Not because the young man is special, but because the culture has changed. The Reed Protocol has embedded vigilance into institutional expectations. The promise Ash made to Marcus has become everyone's promise. Ash drives away from the base as night descends. He lives alone in a small house 30 miles away, a place filled with memorabilia from his years of service. Marcus's photo sits on a shelf among others. Young men in dress uniforms, their eyes bright with confidence that comes before you learn what service truly costs. He doesn't speak to the photo. That would be theatrical. But he thinks the words that matter. I kept the promise. The work continues. Your name lives on not in memory alone, but in actions taken, systems implemented, lives protected. You're still saving people, Marcus, just in a different way than either of us imagined. Before sleep, he thinks about young Airman Martinez and the specialist at Gate 7 and all the others carrying the work forward. He thinks about Hayes taking the Reed Protocol to the national level, about institutional change rippling outward from one September afternoon. He thinks about the fact that somewhere tonight, on some military installation, someone is safer because of work that began with a promise made 40 years ago. This is how promises become eternal. They stop being individual obligations. They become culture, procedure, expectation. They become so embedded in institutional fabric that eventually people forget there was ever a time when they didn't exist. Marcus Reed's name will fade from living memory eventually. The people who knew him will pass away, but the Reed Protocol will remain, will evolve, will continue protecting people who will never know why it's called that. That's the truest form of legacy. Impact that continues long after anyone remembers the source. Ash falls asleep thinking about gates and promises, about standing watch even when no one asks you to, about refusing to move when instinct says danger is coming, about the truth that some obligations don't end when you take off the uniform. They endure. They shape who you are and what you do with the years you're given. And sometimes, if you're stubborn enough and fortunate enough, they change the world in small but meaningful ways. They make people safer. They prevent the preventable. They honor the fallen by protecting the living. If you've stayed with us through this story, you understand something important about service. Dedication doesn't retire. Vigilance is a choice made daily. Sometimes one person refusing to look away can change everything. In your own life, there are gates to guard and promises to keep. Maybe not literal military installations, but places and people and principles that need someone to stand watch, to pay attention when others look away, to do the unglamorous work of preventing disaster before it arrives. Honor isn't always loud. Sometimes it's an old man standing at a gate in the afternoon heat, keeping a promise nobody asked him to keep. Sometimes it's showing up when it would be easier to stay home. Sometimes it's remembering when everyone else has forgotten. The world needs more people like Ash, people who stand their ground, people who keep their promises, people who understand that service doesn't end, it just changes form. Be that person. Stand at your gate, keep your promises. The lives you save might never know your name, but that doesn't make them any less saved. That's the lesson, that's the legacy, that's the call.